Hey everybody, it's me Ashish, and before we begin, I just want to give a quick thank you to everybody listening, watching, and supporting the podcast. It means the world to us, and we're so appreciative. I just want to let you guys know that you guys can always ask us questions, give us segment ideas, and keep up with the fun, all at AshishandFriends.com. We're on Twitter at AshishandPals, we're on Instagram at AshishandFriends, and hey, we're even on Facebook, facebook.com/AshishandFriendsPod. If you're watching this video, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to the channel. All that following and liking and subscribing will help us grow and keep going, so we appreciate it so much. And once again, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Yes, welcome to another great episode of the Ashish and Friends podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing the Madden rings that just came out. The game's coming out soon. It's pretty controversial, actually, and it's been in the news lately. So we're going to discuss what our opinions are on the ratings and what the rankings should be. As always, I'm your host, Ashish, and you can catch me on Instagram and on Twitter at AshishAiri. Of course, I'm joined by my longtime friends and co-hosts. We've got Shahan at Shahan Jayaraja. We've got Dev at Superlaser, and we've got Ryan in the house. So we've got a full house today. It's going to be very entertaining. Football is actually one of the things that we're all really big fans of, actually. Like, we all played fantasy football for like so many years together. And so without further ado, let's just go. We're going to do wide receivers and tight ends in this episode. Shahan, you want to start talking about the wide receivers? We'll go by like 3 at a time.
So to me, I think that the top 3 is probably correct. It's in a different order though than what I'd probably have it as. I think that look, Michael Thomas is a fantastic player. He's very deserving of being, in that 97, 98, 99 conversation, but to me he's not that 99 guy. To me, I think DeAndre Hopkins is that 99 guy to me. I think he's the best receiver in the league. Look, when you ask for a receiver, and one of the things that's going to make this interesting and make this difficult is just trying to evaluate what we value most in a receiver and how do you compare some of these guys, right? Like, how do you compare Stephon Diggs to DeAndre Hopkins? But to me, a guy who can create separation, a guy who can go up and get the ball, and the guy who can beat multiple coverages. And to me, DeAndre Hopkins is number 1 on the list. I'd have Julio Jones number 2 on the list and Michael Thomas number 3. I can't argue that much with any of those top 3 being in any order. Like, I think that any of them could deserve being at 99 rating. But when you look at what DeAndre Hopkins has done the last couple of years, it's insane. And look, man, you're mixing him now in Arizona with Kyler Murray. I mean, it's gonna be incredible.
I would have to agree with your assessment. I thought the top 3 can be interchangeable because I think they're all top tier 1 receivers. And I've been trying to figure out if they're basing it just on last year's season or if they're basing also historically in what they're known for. Because based on last year's season, Michael Thomas was a stud. I mean, he had 150 catches, 1,700 yards, 9 touchdowns, incredible season. Like, I think that's the 99 season. But from what he's done and, like you said, the big plays, I think Julio and DeAndre Hopkins make more big plays and are known for that. But I think they're the top 3 tier 1 receivers that you think of right now. So I'm fine with whatever order.
What about you, Dev?
Yeah, I actually completely agree with Shahan. I think that the ordering is exactly like these 3 are in their own tier, right? Like, if we're talking about receivers, this is like the S tier. These are the 3 best in the league that you would definitely just plug onto any team, right? And I agree. So to me, DeAndre Hopkins is number 1. It's just the fact that he does everything, right? Like, there's no flaw in DeAndre Hopkins games, right? I think that you could argue, like, with Julio Jones, there's like the red zone, and for some, like, his numbers in the red zone are actually kind of surprising, right? Like, they just don't feel real, and I think that there's a factor to that, right? Like, I think there is a little bit of, like, his numbers are not as good as he really is in the red zone. His numbers are like underperforming what his value is. But DeAndre Hopkins has no flaws in this game, right? There's everything. So I think he's the clear number 1. To me, I'm a big fan of just consistency. So I probably go with Michael Thomas too, because he just gives you that 5 to 7, even more catches a game, right? So that's probably where I would go, and then I probably then put Julio third. But to me, like none of like Hopkins is the only one I think I could justify a 99 rating on. I think if I was doing it, they would all be 98s. But like if I'm gonna give a 99 to anyone, Michael Thomas seems like not the person to give it to.
Yeah, he's a big time possession guy. He's a guy who obviously has been so big for New Orleans, but like, you know, you kind of look at also what they're doing in that offense versus what obviously DeAndre Hopkins has had to deal with offense wise in a lot of ways. Like, I don't know. I just see a guy who in Hopkins who's managed to deal with all different kinds of quarterbacks. It hasn't always been Deshaun Watson back there.
Yeah.
A guy who's managed to deal with all different kinds of offensive lines. A guy who's managed to deal with, you know, some pretty pitiful scheming in some regards. But like, you know, Michael Thomas, you're talking about a guy who's in a perfect situation, and I do think that's a factor for me.
Right. For me, I kind of agree with exactly what Shahan said. Like, honestly, Michael Thomas dominated last season. You can see that, but he was targeted like way more than any other receiver, right? And you don't see like any super like spectacular thing of him, right? Like he's damn good at everything, but it's not like something that like puts him far apart from anyone else. And with that said, I do think DeAndre Hopkins, like Shahan mentioned, he had like, you know, Osweiler back there. He had Brandon Whedon back there, but like his numbers never dip, right? He's always known as one of the best receivers. And I think he does have the best hands. You always see those like one-handed, like long ass grabs. He can run down the, you know, the end zone and shit like that. And yeah, that's why I think he was number one. But then when I did some more research, like Julio Jones had a little bit of a dip last season, so I could get why he's number two. I think just in my mind, he's like the prototypical receiver anyone thinks about, right? And he can dominate the whole game, any given game, right? He's super tall, he's strong, and he's super fast. But yeah, so I'd go with the same ranking Shahan had: Hopkins 1, Julio Jones 2, and Thomas 3. But yeah, these are S tier guys, definitely in a, you know, tier of their own. So I don't have like a huge major thing about this.
Yeah.
Let's look at the next three. We've got Tyreek Hill, right, with a 96 rating at number 4. Devontae Adams at number 5 with a 94 as well, and Amari Cooper at number 6. So what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is I'm fine with Tyreek Hill as 4 because he showed he's a speedy receiver. He's definitely like a 99 speed or whatever he is. And he makes big plays, especially for his stature. I think he makes a lot of big plays. He was hurt a couple games, and he still almost put up 1,000 yards and whatever touchdowns. So I think he's not a tier 1, but he's right on the top of the tier 2s. I also think Devontae Adams is right after him on the list. He was playing in a team this year that Aaron Rodgers didn't throw much. It was Aaron Jones' show most of the season. So that's probably why his stats took a little dip. But having said that, he was a clear number 1 on the team, still put up numbers and still was a solid receiver. But my number 6 is a shocker. I don't think, because I think you said Tyreek is a 96. I think he's more of like a 94.5 and Devontae is 94, like around they're similar, but he gets a little edge. But I don't think, you said Mario is 6, right? 6?
Yes, at 94 or at 93 rating.
93.
I don't think Mario's a 93. I think he's a 91, 92, or 90 to 92. And I think I think Keenan Allen should be number 6 on that list. He put up 1,200 yards and 6 touchdowns with an aging Rivers. I think he deserves it. He has a lot of passion. He was literally like the only receiver that was solidified on that team. Michael Williams was stepping up. He was proving to be a solid receiver, and the Hunter Henry came halfway through the season. I think Keenan Allen's more of a 93 right there on that number 6, right above Amari.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's go around, Dev, what you think. Ryan, I kind of agree with what you said. You don't get points for being passionate. Otherwise, Des Bryant would be 99 all the time. Dev, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Tyreek at 4 is like pretty obvious, right? I don't think he's like that S tier receiver anymore. Like obviously he was for so long, but injuries, and when you're a speed receiver, you slow down, right? Like that's just part of the game. But Tyreek's obviously up there, and then like if you're just considering like the quarterback, right? Like Tyreek plus Mahomes is like the best combo to me on the list, right? So I think that does, obviously we're talking about in the bubble with Madden ratings, but like it's a factor, right? If there's a speedy receiver and you're gonna need a quarterback that can actually get you the ball, right? And Mahomes is definitely that guy, right? So then number 5, Devontae Adams, I also agree with. I think Devontae is just one of those like all around, just a great receiver. And Ryan kind of talked about how his numbers did take a dip this year. I think that Rodgers is going to be a little bit better this year. They're going to figure out the offense a little bit more, and two, I think a big part of that was that the receiving core around him got way worse, right, going into last year, and I haven't looked at all of Green Bay's transactions, but I don't remember it getting any better this year. Is it?
Right. At the same time, dude, Adams did miss 4 games with like turf toe injury, so like his numbers weren't too bad. He was on pace for like 1,300 and 7 touchdowns. So pretty good. And of course, they were in a new scheme under a new coach this year too, right?
Yeah.
So like,
plus a turf toe injury, even if you're missing some games, it's like a lingering injury too, right?
Yeah.
And then Cooper. So it becomes harder, right? Like with this 6 through 10 range. I mean, I'm a big Amari Cooper fan, but like I don't know if I would have him 6. Like personally, for me, I would put Mike Evans above him at 6, which I think is a little bit controversial, but I really love everything Mike Evans does. And this is like a pet peeve as a Cowboys fan, right? And I don't know if it's the refs or what, but Amari Cooper gets called for way too many offensive pass interferences, and it is drive killing. Like, and that's my biggest complaint with him. That's why I wouldn't have him at 6.
What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, for me, I talked about it a little bit before. To me, I value a receiver who I feel like can do everything, and I also value receivers who I feel like could be great in any situation. Guys who are that's again to me, that's why Hopkins is the number 1 guy, because I feel like I've seen him do it through so many things, and it's kind of funny because I see this middle group and I see a bunch of guys who I feel like are built a lot by their situations, and so for me, like. Look, this is probably unfair to Tyreek Hill. I just can't view him in that same caliber as those top guys when we don't necessarily know what he's not going to be next to one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of football, right? Like, he's one of those guys who's such a perfect fit for the situation that he's in that, like, don't get me wrong, he's in this top group, but you mentioned him. To me, I'm a little surprised that Mike Evans isn't a little higher. I think that Mike Evans is a guy who is also in that same sort of tier of being a more complete receiver, a guy who can kind of do it all. I'm a little surprised that he's behind this entire group, in my opinion. And the other guy who I'll mention in that sort of conversation, I know what all happened last year. I know how bad everything last year was. But, like, I don't know. Odell's still a really, really elite receiver when he has it going. Now, he doesn't necessarily deserve to be in that sort of 95 range right now just because of how the last couple of years have gone. But honestly, I don't really see any of these players as being true sort of 96, 95 types. I think that there's a pretty significant drop between that top 3 group, and I probably wouldn't have another receiver higher than like 94.
I think that's totally fair, to be honest. Like, when you look at Tyreek, of course, he's like a speedy dude, and with Mahomes, he can just like launch it anywhere, and like Tyreek could like go over and grab it, right? Like, he's no doubt a great player, right? But like when you're talking about these next group of receivers, I think 94 is like the peak for them, at least in this rating, is what I agree with. I do think Davante Adams is a really good player. He's been consistent over the past few years as well. With Amari, I'll agree with you, Dev. You can talk about the flags and whatnot, but he does like not show up on away games, right? Like that's a big deal to me. And just overall, like, I like his hands. He's a good route runner, right? But he's not like amazing at anything, right? Maybe the route running, right? But his hands aren't like spectacular. His speed's okay, it's nothing like significant. So I think he should be actually like a 90, right? And you can't go based off like someone's career. Otherwise, I would agree with Shahan. Like, Odell is obviously like super talented compared to the rest of these receivers. But yeah, I don't know. I think one person that you could contend right here is Mike Evans, or probably his partner, Chris Godwin, who's like left off this complete list. Like, he's not in the top 10.
Oh, he's in my top 10.
Yeah, he's in my top 10 for sure too, right? Like, he had 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns, and he did really well. And I think this was a shots at him for like not being in the top 10. Like, he deserves it for sure. We can go to 7 through 10 and just talk about a couple players real quick. Sean, you want to start again? We got Stephon Diggs, 92, Mike Evans, Odell, and Keenan.
So if I'm looking at this list again, so there's that top three group. I think that I throw Mike Evans into that middle group, and then for me, Keenan Allen, obviously, I think definitely deserves to be in that group, deserves to be in that 90 group. And I guess the thing with Odell, right, is like when I look at what he could accomplish this year, like I honestly can't really explain what happened last year, right? Like we just see obviously him being in what seems like such a good situation and having that talent around him. I mean, I can't really explain it. And yeah, I mean that probably does unfortunately mean that he deserves to be in the low 90s instead of sort of the mid 90s where he's been for a lot of his career. But I am a little surprised to see him behind like a Stephon Diggs. Like I know what Stephon Diggs can do, but I don't. He's again to me it's about being a complete receiver, and I think that Odell, when he performs, which obviously wasn't for a lot of last year, I think that he's proven that he's definitely in that complete conversation.
Right. I think Odell's someone that like vies for that top tier like group, to be honest, right? I really didn't know what happened last year either because I thought he missed a couple of games. I was like, how are these his stats? But he was available for all
he was on my
16 games.
fantasy team. It was bad.
So I was like, what is going on? Well, he did destroy me in the one game he played against me, so I was like, shit. But yeah, so I don't see what's wrong with Odell. I do think he should be above like Amari Cooper and Diggs, in my opinion. I don't think he's like a 96 right now, right? Like obviously he had an off year, but he's definitely in that second tier, I think, like right next to this top three.
Should have drafted Jarvis Landry instead.
Yeah, I think for me, Diggs probably doesn't belong on this list. He had a really bad year. He's very inconsistent, right? Like he can do a lot when he has the ball. Maybe it's Kirk Cousins, right? I don't know, but he's just never consistent, right? Thielen's the one that's like feeding off that offense. Mike Evans, I think you're right, kind of in the same group with Odell as a second tier kind of guy. And Keenan, I think Ryan had a good point. Is like Rivers is slowing down a little bit. He's always been like a really stud receiver, but he does have like some injury issues that are prolonging always. What do you think?
Well, he's had it his whole career, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, that's really like as a fantasy player, right? That's what Keenan Allen is like known for. He's like a no draft for me because he will always get hurt, guaranteed. Like
that's like the same thing with Hunter Henry, right? Like his buddy in crime. Like they're really good, but like how many games are they gonna play each year? We don't know.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, so for me, I have Amari, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin right there at like 92, 93. And like you said with Odell, he has the potential, and has done it where he has amazing seasons and is that number one, does everything kind of receiver. But last year just wasn't, and I think that's where he fell on the list, just because of last year's performance. I definitely take out Stephon Diggs. I think he's had potential. He's had amazing games. So I think he's capable, but I don't think he's a top 10 worthy. He's at 88. He's right up below 90, right below top 10. But I don't think he's in the top 10 that I look at. And I put Chris Godwin in the top 10. And then there's another two receivers I think are just right outside, but you can make an argument for top 10. I think the first one's Allen Robinson. I think he's the clear number one for Jacksonville. Or not Jacksonville, Chicago. He wasn't Jacksonville. Chicago. He put up numbers. He was quiet, though, but he put up numbers. He made a bunch of catches. I think he's a solid. I mean, he's right outside top 10. I don't think he makes top 10. The other one is Cooper Kupp, and I'll tell you why. I think that Rams offense is predicated on Kupp. He made all the big plays pretty much, and when he was hurt, the offense is non-existent. So I think Cooper Kupp should be mentioned there for the top 10. So those are the other two that are right outside the top 10, peeking in.
What about you, Dev?
Yeah, so I actually agree with Ryan. I think the only sub on my top 10 is Diggs out, Godwin in, which like really kind of hurts because I do like it feels weird saying that Diggs is in the top 10 receiver, right? Because like Diggs, like the top 11 is so stacked, right? To me, there's so many great receivers. If we're doing my whole board, just so you know where I differ from the Madden ratings, the top 5 is exactly the same minus some ordering there. I would have Evans 6. I would have Amari Cooper 7. Odell Beckham Jr. 7, Amari Cooper 8. And then I would have Godwin 9 and Keenan Allen 10. So that would be my top 10. Diggs would probably be 11. There's some other receivers that are just right on that bubble. Like, we're coming off 2 years where Landry has actually looked really good. And that's the really interesting thing because, I mean, anyone who watched a Browns game, right? Landry looked better than Odell last year, right? Um, and where does that land him? Is he in that bubble? Obviously, he's a little older receiver too. But maybe him, maybe Thielen would also be someone in that bubble. There's quite a few, and we're looking at some of the new receivers coming into the league this year as rookies. I would be surprised if one of them didn't try to crack into this like 85s, 88s, 89s by the end of the year. Like I could easily see Judy and Lamb cracking this top 10.
Right, and just a quick note with Landry, like he's led the led the league in like receptions for a couple years, right? With Miami,
Yeah.
I think he's just so versatile. You could put him like to run straight right, like routes down the field, or in the slot, like his original spot, right? He's a damn good player, but I think he's kind of in that bubble, like in the 11 to 15 range for me. Shahan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Godwin not being on the list is a little weird. And it's actually kind of funny looking at the list of top receivers from last year because, like, DJ Moore is a guy who nearly 1,200 yards playing with such a terrible quarterback situation. Now, obviously, he doesn't deserve to be in the 90 conversation, but I'd assume that he's going to be in the high 80s, for example. And
Right.
same with Allen Robinson. Like, Allen Robinson's playing on a team that really is built to not create for him in a lot of ways. And he's managed to stay productive. So I think that, I think I look at guys who are in those kinds of situations who still manage to put up big numbers, and Cortland Sutton's another one. I think that Cortland Sutton's a guy who's on the way up in a lot of ways, and I think that as Drew Lock continues to get better, and as they continue to have some more options over there, I think that they have a lot of potential, and Cortland Sutton has potential to maybe break into that group. And Deb, like you said, I mean, these last two wide receiver classes are some of the best that have ever come through the league. I mean, these are going to be two very special classes. And I'm very curious to see, especially as you kind of have some of these guys start to age out. I'm really curious to see who kind of moves into that group.
Right. Like, yeah, obviously Dev mentioned the rookie class, but the year before that, like you got DJ Metcalf, who was like actually like spectacular, right? Interested to see where he goes. For me, yeah, I think I can agree with Diggs getting out and putting Godwin in there. I'm really struggling with like the 9-10 spot. I mean, I do think Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper deserve to be like 9-10, but like some other guys you can mention, obviously Ryan did mention Cooper Kupp. I'm a huge fan of his too. I think he's got the speed, he's got the hands, and one of those plays he was like at the 40-yard line and knocked off 3 defenders and got a touchdown, right? And the other person I think who's super underrated after looking at his stats is Kenny Golladay. This guy has 65 catches for 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns, right? And if you're looking at all the other receivers with similar numbers, like he has the most touchdowns, probably like the least catches out of those guys. I think he's just super underrated because the team's just like meh, right? But I think he should at least be in contention for the top 10, right? Maybe like that 12 spot. Someone else is like
consideration. Matt Stafford was out half of the season.
Right.
Backup QBs,
and they put in 2 different QBs like to try it out. So like he still had
numbers. He produced.
Exactly. Like these are incredible numbers to have. And just some other, like 2 other names I'll throw out there is like Devontae Parker, right? With like a struggling, like rebuilding Miami team. He still put up like nearly 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns, right? And I think he's always been talented, right? He just kind of goofs off and isn't consistent all the time. But I think he should be highly rated. And like one rookie from this past year is AJ Brown. The guy had over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and actually I was looking at like super deep stats, and he had like the most yards after catch per reception more than anybody else, right? He had like 9, where everyone else is like at a 6 or below, and he also had like the most space between him and the defenders, because like once you give him the ball, he's off, right?
Every single person who watched college football in 2018 could tell you that A.J. Brown is 50 times the player that DK Metcalf ever was. A.J. Brown was a goddamn problem.
Right. And I think just looking at these stats, like I saw him like obviously play, but like these stats are really good. And I think what you go with DK Metcalf is like people didn't think he was going to become anything. That's why he like fell so late. But, I think he's on up and up.
The question that I was going to ask was, when you look at this rookie class, who's going to be the number 1 guy in it by the end of the year, do you think?
I think it's going to be Judy.
Yeah.
I think Judy's going to be better than Sutton this year. That's my controversial opinion.
Here's the only question that I have about it is that Judy's a big time timing guy. Like he's an incredible route runner and all that sort of stuff. And I'm just not sure whether Drew locks the guys
True.
all, on those routes, right? Like that's always sort of my worry when you've got a guy who's such a good route runner, who's like such a timing guy, somebody who knows how to get open. Like you got to trust the guy to then get it to him. And that's one thing with Sutton is like Sutton's sort of one of those bigger bodied receivers. So he's kind of been able to get around that. And
you can overcome more when you're like an athletic receiver, like a bigger body, than when you're like a precision receiver, right?
Right.
Precision receivers require more around them. But yeah. I think that Drew Lock kind of showed that he could be that guy. Now, will he be? I don't know. But I think he has the potential.
Yeah. With that said, I don't think he'll be one of the top 3 receivers, to be honest. I think with Lamb, you already got like so many weapons already, right? So they're not just like going to feed him the ball all that much. Ruggs, like possibly, right? Like I don't know what's going on in Oakland, to be honest. And with the Broncos, I think the Broncos is going to be one of the most fun teams to watch, right? They have Noah Fant, a stud tight end. They just got Judy. They have Sutton.
You're stealing my talking point for the next segment.
and they did draft like another like speed receiver for the slot. So I think that team will be fun to watch. I think he's gonna be surprised, to be honest.
So the guy who I'm gonna be really interested in seeing, who I think could maybe be a little bit of a sleeper pick. Like a lot of the sleeper picks have been talked about so much that they're not sleeper picks anymore. But to me, I'm really interested to see what T. Higgins does in Cincinnati. So he was a receiver at Clemson, big bodied guy, 6'4", 215. He's somebody who I think kind of fell out of the conversation a little bit because of how good LSU was last year and how good Alabama's receivers were. But like he had been a dominant receiver for multiple years at Clemson. And now he goes to a situation where, you mentioned AJ Green is coming back. You've got Tyler Boyd on that roster. T. Higgins is going to have a big opportunity, I think, to come in and contribute right away. And I think that he's going to be one of those guys who is going to be in such a good situation and get a lot of targets just because of the buildup of that roster.
Yeah, and at the same time, you also have like John Ross, right? Like there's someone they drafted super high just a couple of years ago, hasn't really lived up to that potential, but that's another team with a lot of weapons. And I think like you're kind of in that same target, like somewhere in the first round, I think is where we're gonna see like the best.
And obviously,
receiver.
we're all part of Denzel Mims hype, obviously.
Yes, no, for sure. I think that was a steal by the Jets, right? Looking forward to that. We'll talk about the tight ends right now. We'll go back to that some other episode. So let's talk about the tight ends, and we'll just go 5 and 5. So at the top 5, we've got Kittle at a 98, Kelsey at a 97, Rob Gronkowski at a 95, Zach Ertz 90, and Austin Hooper rounds out the top 5. What are your thoughts on that, Shahan?
Yeah, look, I understand why Gronk gets the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, that's a lot of benefit of the doubt to be a 95 in Madden. I mean, we're still talking about a guy who obviously was still very good his last time on the field, but was clearly aging, right? Like was clearly not as fast, was clearly not as dominant as he had been in previous years.
He wasn't a 95 last time he was on the field. Why is he a 95 this year?
like just to jump in and be like, all right, not only is he the third best, but he's like supposed to be a world better than Ertz too. Like I just don't really know about that. And I was a little surprised with some of the guys who ended up being as high as they were. Like I was a little surprised that Engram was as high as he is. Like really good player, but still somebody who hasn't necessarily had a breakout moment. And I'd argue some of the same stuff with Hooper. Like that, that's not necessarily, he's not a dominant tight end right now per se. Now, at least the thing that you say with Engram is like he's under a 90, right? Hooper's a 90. That's pretty dang high for him.
Hooper's an 89.
Is he an 89? Okay.
Well, yeah, he's an 89. Sorry, Ertz is a 90.
Yeah. And so, like, I wouldn't have those guys as close to Ertz as they are. The guy who I do kind of like that is sort of building his way up right now is Mark Andrews. Like you said, it usually takes more than 1 year before you really start to see, some of that stuff catch up. And I think that Mark Andrews had a really, really good first season in Baltimore. And I think obviously they've got such a strong team overall, but I think that Andrews was a dominant player at Oklahoma, and I think that he's just continued that on in the league.
Yeah. So yeah. Sorry to clarify, Shahan. What would be your top 5 then?
Yeah, so Kittle, I think for sure number 1 guy to me. Kelsey, I think for sure number 2 guy to me. I'd have Ertz third, I'd say. Mm-hmm. After that, I mean, 4 and 5 gets a little dicey. I think Gronk is one of those two probably.
And then maybe an Andrews.
Maybe I don't know if I'd have him 5. It gets so tough after that. I mean, a Waller, I think, he ended up 10. I'm a little surprised he didn't end up a little higher. And Noah Fant's another guy who I think could be in that conversation. I mean, I'd say Waller probably is 5 after Gronk. But I think that we're talking about like, Kittle's a 98, Kelsey's a 97, Ertz should be like a 92, and then be in like the 88 range after that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm totally right there with you, Shahan. I think you had it spot on, right? Gronk shouldn't be a 95. I mean, if you look at his last 2 seasons, 2018, he played 13 games, right? Like, so majority of it, 682 yards. Like, not great, right? And in 20, I'm still good, right? But, like, he has a year off. I mean, the biggest benefit is, like, his body didn't take any more hits, right? So you're just like, okay, maybe he's, like, healthier. But, his muscles, like, we didn't see that. We saw it kind of get deflated. In the top 5, kind of agree with what Shahan said. Honestly, I might put like Gronk at 6. I think Waller is like super athletic build. He had the second highest receiving yards. Kittle did miss like a couple games, but still on Oakland, right? Like holy shit. And he did have 3 touchdowns. So I really think he's like number 4, number 5. Totally agree with Mark Andrews too. I think he was a stud for the Ravens. Team with a lot of weapons, right? Like they're building, nice receivers. They had like 3 good tight ends they've like drafted over the years. I think my top 5 would be Kelsey, Kittle, then probably Ertz at like 92, 93. I'd say he did fall off a little bit. He did miss the last game too. But yeah, Ertz there, then probably Waller, and then Mark Andrews.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'll mention about Kittle is that like obviously all these guys are tight ends because they're not just receivers. But man, Kittle is an absolute monster as a run blocker too. I mean, he's one of those guys who like you're talking about him being like a difference-making type of player in the run game. So obviously, you mentioned. I mean, I think he still cleared 1,000 yards, which is insane with the sort of time that he missed and all. But I think that when you look at his overall impact, I mean, to me, he's definitely the number 1 tight end.
For sure. Or what do you think, Dev?
Yeah, so I don't want to be too much of an echo chamber because I do basically just agree with you guys point by point for everything. And I'm not a big Madden expert because I don't play the games. But Kittle not being a 99 was a little weird to me, and I don't know how much it takes to be a 99 tight end. But like Kittle has everything, right? So to me, Kittle like if you're gonna make Michael Thomas a 99, like Kittle is to me better at being a tight end than Thomas is at a receiver by a slight edge, right? Obviously, we're talking about like grains of hair, like strands of hair, right? This is not a huge gap or anything. But yeah, Kittle and Kelsey, I think, are pretty easily 1 and 2 and pretty easily solidified in that order. To me, Ertz got really underrated here. I think 90 is low for him. Like you said, I would have probably assumed he would have been like a 93-ish player. I guess like I probably would still have Gronk in my top 5, maybe even at 4 just because of who he is historically. I'm an OU fan, so like I probably put Andrews 5th, but that's my very biased opinion.
Ryan, do you kind of agree with the top 5, and then you can talk about the 6 through 10 as well?
Yeah, I echo similarly with the top 5. Agreed. Kittle 1, Kelsey 2. I think, and then Ertz is 3. I have actually Andrews is 4, solely because he was the lead receiver on that Baltimore Ravens team, and the offense was predicated around Jackson, the run game, and Andrews. And even though it's early, I think he kind of broke out on that team and was a solid, and both a run blocker and a receiver. And then I wasn't much into watching the Raiders, but I know Waller broke out, so that's why he's number 5. And I think Gronk gets a 90. He was out for 1 season. He was hurt the season before. It's just hard to defend putting him higher than 5 or 6 on that spot and around a 90. 95 is too high. And then for the 6 through 10, I don't have my list for them.
I can read it out for you. So the Madden ratings, Evan Ingram is 6, 88. Jared Cook is 7, 87. Mark Andrews is 8 at 86. Greg Olsen is 9 at 86. And Darren Waller is 10 at 85.
Yeah, so mine will be Gronk and then Ingram, because I think Ingram is very talented, very athletic, but he was just injured, and he was on the Giants offense, which was a work in progress last year. So it showed him off for what it was worth, but not for what he could actually do. And then after that is probably Hooper, and then Olsen, and then whoever I forgot.
Jared Cook and
Well, I think it'd be Cook and then Olsen. It's just I don't remember. Was Cook on the Packers, right?
Cook was on
No,
the
Cook
Saints.
is Saints.
Saints. He got hurt too. I don't know. Like they're the only reason I have Hooper. So this is the only point I'll make. I have Hooper low on my list because I think, as Shahan alluded to, some of the other players, he was on the ideal offense to allow him to produce because he had Matt Ryan as QB, he had Julio Jones taking up attention on one side, he had Ridley on the other side, and it was a really pass-dominant offense. So that's why he ended up getting a lot of production. But I think it's more of a one-hit wonder because I don't think it's going to translate into Washington's team because I think that's where he got moved.
No, he's on the Browns, right? Or is he on Washington? Where's Hooper this year?
Well, wherever he is, obviously.
I'm pretty sure Hooper's on the
confidence in him.
Browns this year. I could be wrong.
And then
I
also-
will say
He's on the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
for a lot.
I will say too. I am pretty shocked to see Greg Olsen as high as he is.
Yeah, Greg Olsen is not a top 10 tight end anymore.
I love Greg Olsen. Seems like a great guy, but like, what are we doing here?
I mean, I think that one's more of like what he's done in the past for us, right? He has been consistent, but dude, he's old now. He's always injured. I definitely I'd be okay dropping him. Actually, I think someone else that could take his place is like Dallas Goedert, right? He actually had similar stats, and he's younger.
Yeah, Goddard wouldn't be a bad pick. Again, Noah Fant to me, I think, is an obvious one. Hunter Henry, I think, is an obvious one. And with him, obviously, I have the questions about staying healthy, but like, come on, you're comparing him to Greg Olsen.
Right. I think, they're just going off consistency and what he's done in the past. Obviously, Seahawks have Will Disley, right, who's a beast. I'm excited to see him with the Seahawks, to be honest, but definitely probably shouldn't be on this list. I think one bust from last year, who I'm looking forward to in the future, is Hawkinson with the Lions, right? Him and Fant were like super high in my mind, so I'm looking forward to what they can do. Overall, I think 6 through 10 for me. We said we'll go Kittle, Kelsey, Ertz, then probably for me Waller, Andrews, Gronk, and I ended out Evan Ingram, really talented dude. I think he was like top 5 when he was healthy, but it's like been 3 seasons now where he hasn't ended up healthy, right? Like he's missed a lot of games. So I'd probably knock him down to like the 8 range, right? So we got Gronk, probably Jared Cook. Jared Cook actually did amazing last year. I didn't realize this. He had like 700 yards, 9 touchdowns, right? That's pretty amazing, right? For like an older guy. So Gronk, Cook, Ingram, probably Hooper then, and then probably Goddard or maybe even Noah Fant.
I agree. I think
Correct.
just that's it. Correct. And the episode, we're good to go. See ya.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's interesting, just looking at this entire list, is like, I mean, a good 2/3 of the league has a pretty good tight end situation. I mean, I think that that's definitely one of the positions that's grown the most over the past, 10 years or so. And I think that obviously a big part of that is how the position's been revolutionized and how, like, in a pass game now, every pass game has sort of a dynamic tight end. But I mean, I do think that it's been really interesting to see that, almost every good team in the league now has an effective tight end, and most have even 2 or 3. So I think it's been a lot of fun to watch. And I'll tell you what, the other thing too is when we're drafting fantasy, like, it makes things a lot better when you're not just necessarily just picking, Travis Kelce or no one, basically, is who you're picking between.
Totally true. And I think what Sean was saying, I was just looking at this list. He's totally right? Like, there's a couple of names that could actually probably make this top 10 next year. He didn't mention Noah Fant, but like someone like Mike Gesicki, right? If they can get something going with Miami, I think he's a really talented tight end. Obviously, the Rams have like 2, right? Higbee and Everett. So it's a very interesting class. I'm interested to see what will happen this upcoming year and see what happens and who's in the top 10 next year for sure. Anyways, guys, I think we discussed enough about these wide receivers and tight ends for this upcoming year and what the ratings are and rankings for us. We'll do a quarterbacks and running backs episode coming up soon. But till next time, we're out.